Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's ACL Deep Dive. I am Dr. Mica Riley, your host today, here at MoveMed Rehab and Performance headquarters in Seattle, Washington. So West Coast is the best coast, is what they always say. But anyways, yes, I am a doctor of physical therapy, a strength and conditioning specialist, an ACL rehab specialist, and an ACLer myself. A lot of what I do and a lot of what I see and have a passion for is ACLers like you every single day. And frankly, I got into this business because of my own experiences where I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more for you guys out there because I went through the same exact thing that you are now going through, unfortunately. And frankly, the care is not as good. The care needs to be better because there are way too many people re-tearing and going through this and probably don't have to. And, are being treated by people who might not be as knowledgeable in this department as, say, low back pain. So this community was designed for you. It was to make sure that you had a solid understanding of what to expect during ACL rehab, a solid understanding of what good care should look like, and to make sure that you are in the right hands for your ACL rehab, because guess what? If you get one phase wrong in the ACL journey, you can't really go back and do it over again, okay? So it's really important that you start in the right hands, or at least you recognize that you are in the right hands or need to find someone to get in the right hands to make sure that you only have to go through this once or just never, ever, ever again, if we can help it. So this is what this community was designed for, to educate you, to empower you, and to make sure that your outcome is a solid one. Going through the ACL roadmap, I hope that all of you have gone through it. If not, take a deep dive through it. There's a lot of helpful information. If I had this tool when I was 16, when I was 19, going through my ACL rehabs, I would have loved to have this because I would have sniffed out what I was not getting and what I was missing. So if there's any other questions that you have that are not answered in our ACL roadmap, DM us. So that way we can make sure that we provide solid evidence-based information behind that question to give you an answer. So today we are going to go over insurance and how it impacts your ACL recovery. I will say a blanket statement that I am not an expert in insurance plans. However, I'm going to share my professional experience with insurance and what I've experienced with my clients regarding care. So, a lot of statements that I will get from people or hear from people is, I have a really good plan. I've got great insurance. Well, I give them the stare because I'm like, great, cool. I'm glad. But guess what? Your insurance is not very good in the rehab department. It might be good for emergency situations. It might be good for seeing your primary care provider, but it is not good in the rehab department. So often people clearly will use their insurance during their ACL recovery, as most people do in the United States. And the first couple questions or statements that usually every clinic gets, or particularly our clinic when it comes to ACL rehab, are two things. The first question they always ask is, do you accept my insurance? And then the second question they always ask or make a blanket statement, well, I have 60 visits and I want to use them all, so I'll be fully covered throughout my whole ACL rehab journey. But why can't I use them all? So I'm going to go through those two things today, and maybe a little bit more. But hopefully this will kind of shed some light and help you understand the whole process, because it can be really confusing. In general, insurance plans, the insurance companies don't even understand their own plans. But I want to highlight one thing. You shouldn't ask whether or not a clinic accepts your insurance. Instead, you should really be asking, are you a qualified ACL rehab expert? Because I don't want you to get in the habit of letting your insurance dictate the type of care that you get, because you need to be in the right hands. And if you need to make an investment, this is an investment worth making, because you can go through this injury again if you're not in the right hands, and we don't want that. But to move on, insurance varies from person to person, and it varies from plan to plan and company to company. Some people might only get 12 visits per year. Some might get 60 visits. But most often people usually get around between the 20 to 24 visit mark. And it's really, really important that strategy is really used during this time. Especially if you are being seen by the same provider for your rehab before you have surgery or in preparation for surgery. And then clearly you're going to need some visits for post-op. And your visit count, let me tell you, does not start over. It doesn't, especially if you were having surgery in the same year that you injured. So there needs to be a strategy in place on how you use your visits. So, for instance, people who go through prehab with me, I will not see them, depending on the situation. Of course, every situation is different, but most often the basics need to be hammered and the work needs to be done by the client. My job as an ACL expert is to provide them with the guidance and to provide them with a detailed plan in place in order for them to prepare for their surgery. And, if I might try to get to know their knee a little bit and see what really aggravates it to start off, maybe once a week for a couple weeks. And then eventually I'll see them less frequently, because at the end of the day, all that needs to be done is the work done. The work needs to put in. And 99% of the time, people just need a plan to follow. It needs to be very clear. But if you aren't doing the work outside of the clinic, there's no point in going in that frequently for accountability, because I'm going to tell you something. Insurance does not cover accountability. And your prehab phase is all about trying to develop that habit, because guess what? It's going to prepare you for your post-op routine. You're going to have an inside look on what your early recovery is going to look like, because it's not going to look any different than what prehab is going to look like in the very early stages of prehab, because it's all about getting that foundation, nailing it. And most often, especially me as a provider, I don't need to sit down and watch you do TKEs. I don't need to sit down and watch you and observe you do heel slides. You need to do that on your own, and you need to do that frequently. And insurance does not cover accountability. I would rather use visits to make sure that we give you progressions and things like that and adjust some program than to sit down and watch you do the same exercises that you need to do 5 times a day. I want to highlight that insurance only covers what is deemed medically necessary. And if we're using up all those visits because you can't get on a routine and you can't be compliant with your exercise program at home, that's just going to hurt you in the long run. You are not setting yourself up for success, especially in preparation for surgery. And then the other question I would have is, well, if you're having a hard time being compliant and being very structured with your program, maybe you're not ready for surgery yet, right? Until you get to that point, because that's going to be a lot of work. It's like a full-time job. And, then the progress will unfortunately be slow, and then you might run out of visits, okay? Then we go into after surgery. So, it's all about strategy at the end of the day. We have to say, okay, well, how many visits do you have? If you have 20 to 24, you're going to run through those fast if you use them twice a week through the first couple months of prehab. That's a lot. Twice a week. That's 8 visits a month. And if you're seeing someone twice a week for 2 months, that's 16 visits out of your 20 to 24 in a year. And then you're left with 4 to 6 visits after for post-op. So it has to be very, very strategic. There's really, the first 1 to 2 months are very redundant, especially, in the prehab phase, but also in the early recovery. You don't need to be seen that frequently. And the first 1 to 2 months are very redundant after ACL surgery anyways. So there's not a whole lot of major changes in the foundational work early on in the recovery process. For instance, typically I will see people about 1 time a week, or maybe even every other week. It depends on the person. And I might see them every other week until we get to a point where we need to do more loaded things. I think 3 times a week, frankly, it's overkill and absolutely not medically necessary. And that only screws you over from being able to use those visits in the later phases, where there's a lot larger, more complex movements that really matter and that are going to be very, very integral and vital to your return to sport process, and where you might need a little bit more guidance with. So it's all about strategy. And, for me and my clients, I'll typically get to a point where I will ride those visits out and see someone less frequently, but with a very detailed plan in place. They know what to expect. They know what's expected of them. They know how to scale back if they need to. They know how to push if they need to. That's what our job is. Our job is to empower you, to help you take charge of the situation, but with some guidance and learned guidance, of course, to really make sure that you're getting where you're going, but still being very strategic about your insurance plan. Because as you know, ACL rehab does not work if you do not. You will not get to where you want to be if you do not have that detailed plan in place. And frankly, if you do not do the work that you need to do. And if you're only using those visits to actually do the work, then it's going to hurt you in the long run. And those are visits wasted, frankly. ACL rehab, we know that it requires you to do the work outside of the clinic, but I really want to be efficient with how I use these visits. One-on-one time with your physical therapist should really be about reassessing the situation, reassessing your program. Do we need to scale back the program because you're getting graft site pain, or you're getting patellofemoral pain, or something like that, or your pain is increasing, or swelling is increasing? I would rather use the time for those visits to address that and change the program as we see fit. I'd rather use it for strength testing and making sure that we're heading in the right direction and pushing them forward, and showing you new movement progressions. I've heard of and seen many comments in ACL recovery groups about, common questions. Well, how, everyone's so different, and who they're seen by is so different, especially if they're in the insurance model. And sometimes providers will try to keep their schedule busy, so they'll say, yes, you need to be seen 3 times a week. So a lot of people in the comments will say, yeah, I'm being seen by my provider after surgery 2 to 3 times a week, and et cetera, et cetera. But guess what? Sometimes they're not making progress. Why is that? Well, one, I think 3 times a week is definitely not medically necessary, because our job is to show them what they need to do, and they need to do it, because it doesn't work if they don't. And there's no amount of extra time seeing me is going to help. They just need to have a plan. But why else are they maybe not making progress? Well, maybe it's because those 3 visits a week are being focused on the wrong things. Maybe it's progressing too fast. And maybe, with someone being seen 3 times a week, even if the surgeon's protocol says it doesn't mean that it really needs to happen, because the surgeon's protocol doesn't really care about how many visits you have. It's just a blanket statement. So again, our job as providers in the ACL rehab world is to empower you and to help you adapt lifestyle changes, because this rehab is very, very dependent on you and what you do, and about how much effort and work you put in. So at the end of the day, when it comes to how insurance is being used in the rehab setting, is it needs to be very strategic. The other component we want to address is the visits. Usually I will get some statements of, well, I have 60 visits and I want to use them all. And this is how I'm going to use them all. And they've already done out the math. Great. I love that you took the time, and it shows me that you're willing to put in the work, and it shows me that you really care about this. But I would love and I wish that you could use all 60 of those visits. But that's not the way insurance works, unfortunately. And a lot of people like you out there might resonate with this, where they're like, yeah, I definitely don't understand my insurance. I thought I had 60 visits a year, and they knocked me off at 20 visits. Insurance, each company has people behind the scenes, behind the curtain, making sure that what we as ACL rehab experts are doing is still considered medically necessary. Now, I want to talk about that word, medically necessary, because it basically is looking at your ability to do your activities of daily living. Are you able to function in your house? Are you able to do the dishes? Are you able to do the laundry? Are you able to care for your children? Are you able to do whatever basic task that involves your daily life? They don't care if you love to go work out 3 times a week and lift heavy crap. They don't care if you want to return back to soccer at full potential. They don't care if you want to go ski the slopes in Whistler or in Utah or at Vail. They don't care about that. All they care about is that you are able to do whatever you need to do on a daily basis, which does not involve recreational activity or sporting activity. So if you can walk around your home, do the dishes, bend over to grab a sock on the floor that your kid left, or stuff like that, if you're able to do that, then anything beyond that is not considered medically necessary. So, but we need to think about this for a second, because I'm sure a majority of you listening in didn't just walk across the street and tear your ACL. There are some very fluke scenarios, some things that happen randomly. But you might have torn your ACL doing something higher level, like skiing, like playing soccer, like playing rugby, lacrosse, football, basketball, hiked, whatever it might be. A majority of ACL tears happen this way. But you don't get to actually be returning back to that high level stuff under insurance's terms. So, for example, I have a client who had have many clients who've been knocked off by insurance, and it really grinds my gears because it's not okay. But I have many clients who will get knocked off around the 20th visit, which is roughly around the 3 or 4 month mark, maybe if we're lucky 5 month mark. Even if they had 60 visits, because insurance felt like at that point in time in their rehab, it was no longer medically necessary. And they usually will always say the patient can provide, or the patient will need a home exercise plan to guide the rest of their rehab. They could do it on their own. I'm the rehab professional. I'm the ACL rehab expert. And it's my job to provide the guidance to people. Just similarly to, I have no idea about anything car related. So I'm going to go take it to the car expert to help handle that situation for me, because I do not want to touch my car. That may be very confusing to me, and I might do the wrong things, and I might mess up my car's engine. I might do the wrong things and not get to where it needs to be. And I might break down on the freeway heading to see my parents. So I don't think it's appropriate for people who get cut off from insurance to try to handle the rest of their rehab continuum, because this is a science. There is a lot of components that need to be looked at, and every situation is very different. And it's very scary that insurances don't consider this medically necessary, but that's the truth. That's the reality that we live in. So, despite me or your provider telling the insurance that you still need rehab because you are only at 60% quad strength, or because you are not decelerating appropriately in a field-based scenario. Despite me even saying that to the insurance company and to the patient, insurance unfortunately has the final say, and that's a problem. So this can cause frustrations and also setbacks in the ACL rehab journey, especially if someone gets cut off around the 3 or 4 month, when they're barely just able to actually start loading, when they're barely able to just start walking. It's so frustrating. But I want to urge you guys, I want to encourage you to make sure that you're not walking the rest of your rehab alone, that you have guidance, expert guidance. And if you want it done the right way, instead of piecing together on Instagram, going to Instagram and looking, oh, well, so-and-so says to do this. Oh, wait, but I need to make sure I do this, and I need to make sure I do that, and I need to make sure I'm doing this. Piecing together exercises that you see on social media is not the right way to do it. It leads to further frustration, can lead to setbacks, especially if you're doing something that you might not quite be ready for, or it can cause you not to progress in the manner that you want to and reach your full potential to return to sport. And usually I will see people return to sport much later than they actually probably needed to, because they were taking it in their own hands. And I would encourage you guys, that this is an investment. I want you to reframe the way that you're asking the question. Instead of asking clinics, do you accept my insurance? Instead, ask them, do you have an ACL rehab expert? Even if they take your insurance. And if the answer is no, don't settle for less. Don't let your insurance plan make the decision for where you get treatment. Don't let it affect your outcome. And if you are one of those out there that do get kicked off by insurance, and you're navigating this whole ACL rehab world by yourself, trying to piece together things that you see on social media, I encourage you not to do that, because there's a lot of integral portions of the rehab process that can be missed and can lead to re-injury down the road, especially within the first couple months after returning to sport if you're guiding yourself, and more importantly within that year, because that's where we see a lot of higher re-rupture rates, whether it's on that side or the other side. So if you are listening and you are frustrated that you just got kicked off of insurance because they no longer deemed it medically necessary, you just got kicked out of your rehab process with your provider, that's what we are here for. We are ACL rehab experts, and we take insurance out of the equation, and we put you and your goals into the equation, and making sure that you achieve that to your fullest potential, but with expert guidance and individualized programming and anything you can imagine. So if this is you listening and you want to know more or you want to see what it's going to take to truly get to your fullest potential, take that leap and invest in your outcome, because you deserve it and you need it. And we need to do everything possible to make sure that you do not go through this again. So if you're feeling lost, reach out to us. Schedule a consult, a free consult, so we can get to know you and your ACL story and see how we can work together for the benefit of you and your outcome to make sure that you don't go through this again. So that's it. That's how the whole world of ACL journeys and insurance goes. Very confusing. Very, very confusing. Very, very frustrating. And I hope one day we do better, but that's just where we're at. So if there's any questions, just reach out to us. And like I said, if you're feeling lost and want to find that light at the end of the tunnel, reach out to us and schedule a consult. I'm Dr. Mica Riley. Stay tuned for more ACL deep dives and let us know if there's any specific topic you want to learn more about. Have a good one.